Hello and welcome to our first episode of From the Helm for 2025. And what better way to kick it off than with a healthcare company that shares have run 168% over the last 6 months as it progresses towards commercialisation for its therapeutics for retinal eye diseases. Opthea's novel drug called Sozinibercept will initially focus on treatment of wet age-related macular degeneration, and today I am honoured to be joined by the company's CEO, Fred Guerard, to discuss recent milestones achieved and how the company is tracking towards commercialisation. Fred, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, I'll start by asking you to provide a brief overview of Opthea's history and what the company is working toward in the healthcare space for our investors who may not have heard of the company before.
Yeah, certainly. So Opthea is an Australian company, dual listed on the ASX and Nasdaq in the US. And we are working towards developing a new drug for a disease called wet age-related macular degeneration, which is a disease of the eye that happens for no particular reason, very often later in life. And this disease characterized by vision loss and can lead to actually legal blindness of the patients if they are not treated. We are working on a molecule called Sozinibercept, and that molecule is basically designed to be used in combination with existing drugs in order to deliver better efficacy on visual outcomes than existing standard of care.
Now, can you talk to us about the benefits and the potential shortfalls that patients are experiencing with existing therapies and how much additional benefits Sozinibercept could add to patients' vision and what that means in your practical day-to-day terms?
Yeah, certainly. So the drugs on the market today were revolutionary 20 years ago. The first drug called Lucentis was launched in 2006 in the US. And for the first time, patients suffering from wet AMD could hope to regain some vision and actually maintain that vision gain for quite some time with regular injections in the eye, which is the way all these drugs are being administered. Fast forward 20 years later after these drugs, and there were multiple follow-on drugs launched in the market. There are currently in the US close to 10 different brand names of different molecules, all targeting the same pathway. The limitation of these drugs is that the patients do not go back to perfect vision. So the vision they've lost before they get diagnosed has not been completely recovered with the existing drugs. So what we're trying to do with our drug, Sozinibercept, is to be injected on the same day, at the same time, in the same eye in these patients, and deliver many more letters of vision. So we're basically in the phase 2B trial that was conducted a few years ago. We actually reached statistical superiority versus standard of care when used with standard of care in terms of visual acuity. So the ability of patients to read smaller letters in the vision chart.
You recently released phase 3 baseline data. Can you tell us why that information is important and why that's given you confidence that you are likely to achieve similar results to your successful phase 2B trial?
Right. So after the phase 2B, the successful phase 2B trial, we embark into this last set of clinical trials we have to do to be approved around the world. And it's what we call pivotal program or phase 3 trials. We're now about to read out these trials. So there are two of them. They are very similar to the phase 2B in design. We are trying the drug in combination with two different standard of care, one in each of these trials. These trials are 1,000 patients each. We run them in 33 countries around the world with 400 clinicians helping us treating these patients in these trials. These trials are designed to demonstrate superiority versus standard of care with injecting Sozinibercept either every 4 weeks in the eyes of these patients or every 8 weeks for 2 years. And the readout we have that's upcoming is about the first year of efficacy data. We will have the data of the first trial in the early part of the second quarter of the calendar year 2026. For the second trial, the readout will be middle of this year. So the baseline characteristics we published a few weeks ago are very important because basically it shows that we have enrolled in these trials the same type of patients as we had in phase 2b, patients with the same age when they were enrolled, the same type of disease severity. So we basically did not deviate from the plan, which was the enrollment criteria of these trials. But what we've published a couple of weeks ago is actually we have a higher proportion in phase 3 of patients that did the best in phase 2b. So basically we enrolled more of the patients on which we had the highest benefit of the combination therapy in phase 2b. So we are very excited by this because basically it maximizes the probability of technical success of the trials.
Now, if successful, is Sozinibercept intended to be complementary or compete with existing approved therapies?
So the beauty is the wet AMD, so the wet age-related macular degeneration market is worth around $12 billion a year around the world, $7 billion in the US. And we are not competing with any of the drugs presently in the market. We will just be added to all of them. So we actually have no competition. We'll be the first company in 20 years to deliver better efficacy for these patients that have this big unmet medical need.
You intend to launch the first product in the US. How big is that market and what is the company's commercialization strategy? And can you talk to us about how the industry is structured as a whole?
Yes, so the USA obviously are the largest market in the world. It's around 60% of the value of the total worldwide market in wet AMD. And this is a market that is very specific. The concentration of injections is extremely high in a very small number of retina practices in the US. So we estimate that 500 clinicians in the US inject half of the volume of injection of the whole country. And therefore, it's very easy for a company like ours, a small biotech company, to actually execute a launch because we do not need to hire thousands of people to be in the field. We need tens of people in the field to cover the entire country. So it's a very elegant business model. It's a very well set up system that has been set up 20 years ago for Lucentis called Medicare Part B. The patients are the drugs are bought and billed by the clinics to the healthcare systems, and over 90% of the patients are covered by Medicare, which is a system in the US that covers all patients that are 65 years plus of age. And therefore, the system has been in place for a very long time. The clinics know exactly what to do and how to make these drugs available to the patients.
Opthea had $130 million cash at the 31st of December. Does this provide sufficient runway to your two major catalysts?
It does. Certainly, we even released publicly that we have enough cash until the third quarter of this year, so through top-line data.
You're starting with the treatment of wet, age-related macular degeneration. What other diseases of the eye are in the pipeline for the future treatments?
So it's a great question. So all agents who've shown benefit in wet AMD actually worked in diabetic macular edema. It's a slightly smaller indication. It's around 50 to 60% of the size of wet AMD, so still very sizable. And this is a condition that affects patients suffering from diabetes, and which if the patients are not, if they are not controlled properly, over time they present with vascular disorders, starting from the very, very small blood vessels. So the first organs in the body, if you don't control your diabetes, to be affected will be the kidney and the eyes. And it presents with accumulation of fluid in the back of the eye. And again, if left untreated, it will lead to visual impairment or blindness. So we intend to start that trial whenever we have the wet AMD data and enough cash, obviously, to run another pivotal trial. But mechanistically, our drug could potentially help tremendously this patient. We would also look at going into combination therapies. We would not be going as a standalone. It would again be in combination with standard of care to deliver, again, superiority in visual outcomes.
Thank you, Fred, for joining us for the Bell Direct from the Helm series. If you'd like to stay up to date with exclusive interviews like the conversation I just had with Opthea CEO Fred Guerard, please be sure to subscribe to the Bell Direct YouTube channel.